What do you take out of Eastern Conference semifinal Game 7 in Boston? Do you take something out of it for the Celtics' ability to move on, or you take something out of it that the Sixers need to do something in order for them to move on? What do you think?
Well, I guess there's an ordering of the priorities, right, in terms of what we leave that with. And it's hard not to leave with looking at the Sixers and just shaking your head and saying, wow, again. And it's not that they lost Game 7, it's that they lost 6 and 7. 6 had to be the game that they played a lot better in. Their MVP, the league MVP, Joel Embiid didn't get a shot the last 4.5 minutes. I mean, that was their shot. And so I'm less, I'm not going to say I'm impressed by the Celtics because I don't think they've been as good, Rich, as we saw them last season. And I think part of it is, the head coach's stubbornness not to use the lineup that he finally used with Rob Williams in there on the court in the starting lineup. The small ball is not something I'm in love with, and so many coaches and players and people in the industry are. But I think that the Celtics, the last 2 games, that's the Boston Celtics team that needs to show up and play against Miami, or else they could be upset. But that came after, Embiid, Harden, and look, I've been aware of Doc Rivers since I was a teenager because we grew up in Chicago at the same time. And I root people. Like, who do you root for? I root for my friends, and Doc and I have been that for decades. And this is a hard one. This is a tough one. And again, you can't talk about the failure of the Sixers without dealing with Game 6. That's when you have to put the Celtics away, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah, and then Embiid afterwards gave Doc a very significant, I would say, vote of confidence. Harden was the exact opposite, saying, yeah, our relationship is okay. And Embiid was raving about Doc, and one would think he wouldn't if you want to ascribe the lack of shots for Embiid or the lack of, posting Embiid up when he had the advantages in Game 6 and 7. He would lay that, I imagine, at the coach's feet, and he didn't. What did you make of of Embiid's comments of it's 5-on-5, and him and Harden needed some help, is what it sounded like to me in that soundbite.
There's a genuine affection between Embiid and Doc Rivers, and not necessarily so with James Harden. Let's face it, this is not new for James Harden. With how many coaches? A half dozen? He's been difficult. He's been difficult. In the best of times, Rich, difficult. MVP times, difficult. A failed playoff player. We've seen Harden. Yesterday was nothing new. That's dotted his career in the postseason, which is double-digit years now. So that didn't sort of jump out at me as much. For whatever failing, and part of the failing of not taking those shots is he's got to go on Embiid. Basketball is a player sport, and no matter how much the coach may diagram things for you and overload things for you, we hear great former players say all the time, you got to demand the ball. And if it needs to be in a huddle, if it needs to be on the floor, him grabbing Maxey or Tobias Harris by the collar of the jersey and saying, give me the damn ball. We know that's what Shaq not only would have done, did. We know that's what Michael Jordan not only would have done, did. We know, my God, Larry Bird used to call Kevin McHale some names we can't even repeat. That's what he did. And so if you're MVP and it's your team, it's also your ball when you need it. And it shouldn't have to come down to any coach diagramming plays. I voted for Embiid this year as MVP. I did. But that's, yes. Do I want to see Doc do some things to get Embiid freed in those last few minutes in Game 6? Absolutely, Rich. Yes. That's the reputation Doc Rivers has had among players, and why so many, Harden not included, want to play for him, is that they think that Doc is great in those situations. And whatever happened that broke down in Game 6, everybody failed. But Harden seems to be, I won't say that top of the list. Embiid's the MVP. But Harden, we've seen do this over and over again. It shouldn't really surprise anybody.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.